Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Business of Sports.
The business of sports can be intimidating or hard for a startup to break into.
We really appreciate when our owners are actually there, with us through the journey.
Teams, ours especially, have been very intentional to diversify at all levels of the company.
I think we're in the golden years for the NFL and college football.
Our demographic reach has continued to expand.
This is going to be really unlocking the streaming platform for sports fans.
Sports valuations are rising. We'll see when they peak.
You don't have to be the best in your sport to make a whole ton of money.
Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports show where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr.
I'm Scarlet.
Damian Sassower has the week off. Coming up today, we take you to the Bloomberg Invest Summit and hear from executives from the Boston Red Sox, Milwaukee Brewers, and Washington Commanders.
Plus, we've got highlights from the latest episode of Bloomberg Latitudes with Haslinda Amin. She speaks with LIV Commissioner Greg Norman and one of LIV's biggest stars, Phil Mickelson.
That is straight ahead on the Bloomberg Business of Sports. But first, the NHL has crowned a new champion.
10 seconds left. 2-1 Panthers. A dream 30 years in the making is a reality. The Florida Panthers have won the Stanley Cup. Lord Stanley is coming home. You always will have a place in South Florida. Oh, my God. The Panthers have won the Stanley Cup for the first time in franchise history. Yeah!
Wow, so low-key. Joining us now is Keith Wachtel. He is the NHL's Chief Business and Revenue Officer. Keith, first, you got to love that call. Welcome to the Bloomberg Business of Sports.
Thank you very much. That is one of the greatest radio calls I think I've ever heard in any sport.
It's right up there with Al Michaels in 1980.
Oh,
right.
I adore that one. Do you believe in miracles?
Yeah.
Yes. That's what my wife says about me when I go to work every day. Anyway, well, I'm going to start with the obvious question, Keith. This went to a Game 7, and first when the Florida Panthers, they went out to a 3-0 lead. And we're thinking, okay, this is going to be a sweep. And all of a sudden, Edmonton said, hold the phone there because we got something to say. And then they reeled the next 3 back, which I have to think that Game 7 was an exciting one to watch for people at home.
It's the 2 greatest words in sports, Game 7, and couldn't be happier that it went there. And our competitive balance usually creates the most playoff games in professional sports compared to some of the other leagues that have 7-game series. We average really close to 6 games per series, and we had a total of 88 games this past playoff. So it was a surprise to see the Panthers jump out, and a pleasant surprise to see the fight in Edmonton and to come back to 3-3. What a great story. Hasn't happened in sport in over 80 years. And I couldn't have set a better stage for Game 7, winner take all. Had the sports landscape all to ourselves. The amount of media on a global basis and certainly in North America was unprecedented across, kind of every distribution platform. So what could have been, certainly a disappointing final from the number of games standpoint turned into the absolute perfect storm. What a great game it was. And the numbers show it across every metric. So it was truly an incredible postseason for the NHL.
It was. And congratulations to the Florida Panthers. And of course, also congratulations and our regrets to the Edmonton Oilers Hockey Club, which got very, very close, but wasn't able to capture the ultimate prize. But Keith, come on, you got to admit that if the New York team went all the way to the end, the number one media market, the whole 30-year anniversary of the last time the New York Rangers won a Stanley Cup, from a business point of view, having a big market media team win the ultimate prize would have been invaluable.
I think the audience now knows Scarlet's a big-time Ranger fan. But it was masked in a good question. Here's what I'll tell you. Clearly,
that's what I do.
Major markets help drive ratings. But the question is, and what we think was so incredible about this series was, first off, you had one U.S. market, right, on the smaller side, and a Canadian market. And we think that this is better for the future of the sport. We grew the audience and fans for life in Florida, certainly in South Florida. In addition, we got to showcase Connor McDavid and a bunch of other incredible superstars in our sport that don't often get that exposure in the U.S. Because, as you know, traditional and they always want the biggest markets, and you don't see a lot of that. What's been great about our relationship with ESPN, ABC, and Warner Brothers Discovery is they have showcased a significant amount of Canadian teams, and our fans have seen Austin Matthews and they have seen Connor McDavid. So that helped. But when you look at it, 16.3 million viewers watched Game 7 of the Stanley Cup across North America. Second most watched of all time. But what is an amazing stat is it is the number one rated sport between the NHL, NBA, and Major League Baseball finals since 2019. And that just shows you the potential. So to your point, if we're doing 16.3 million viewers for Florida Edmonton, there is upside, significant upside when you do get major media markets. But like I said, when we look at our outdoor games, when we look at our All-Star games, we look at all these tentpole events and this Stanley Cup, you can argue that it's better for the future of the sport to be growing fandom in these markets, these, so to speak, you could say non-traditional hockey markets. But listen, Florida right now, you look at what the Tampa Bay Lightning have done, and now the Florida Panthers. That's a pretty good state for hockey, I'll tell you that much.
Absolutely. And I have a bunch of questions to follow up on that. But I want to pick up on something you said when it comes to superstars like Connor McDavid. We know that hockey has long struggled with marketing its best players, even during their prime as superstars. Connor McDavid, Nathan MacKinnon, as much as the NHL tries, they aren't household names like LeBron James or Steph Curry. The TikToks of players getting off the bus in suits is definitely a thing, but nothing like the attention that NBA players get. Why is it harder, do you think, for NHL players to break out as superstars?
I don't think it's hard for them to break out as superstars, certainly amongst the fans of the sport. Like you just said, you named two of the greatest.
But as household names among sports fans overall.
Well, the reason is it's the ultimate team sport. It's always been that way. The way that these players think about the team first, and I'm not saying other sports superstars don't, but it is very different. It is the ultimate team sport. And you have to remember, the best player in the world in Connor McDavid usually plays somewhere between 18 and 20 minutes, a third of a hockey game, right? The most minutes he ever played was Game 7, and it was somewhere in the mid to 26, 27, 28 minutes. That's not even half the game.
Right.
When you look at the quarterback, you look at the running back, you look at, as you said, LeBron James, they're playing the majority of the game. The focus is on them, and that is the biggest difference. And it is the ultimate team sport. You need all players on the ice to have success. They also don't want to put themselves ahead of the team. They're starting to grow their social media profiles, which is helpful. A lot of them have great personalities that we're showcasing through all of our content. But you're going to start to see more of that, right? You read about the release that we did on our Box to Box show, which will be on Amazon Prime coming this October, that really lean into these personalities, because they're good-looking guys. They're very personable. Their stories are amazing. So we as a league are focusing on that, trying to build the stars. But in the end, it is the ultimate team game.
And I think you really see that in how former regular guy players do after they retire. Paul Bissonnette with the Spitting Chicklets podcast, Sean Avery, Kevin Bieksa, like all these guys who are known as regular guys and have that persona, but they have really broken out once their hockey career ended because they're no longer on a team the way they were when they were playing professionally.
Yeah, we have some great personalities, like I said, current players, former players, and we need to continue to build that. You're absolutely right. We do lag behind in a lot of the personal social media profiles of these guys. But the new players that have come into the league, currently in their 20s and the new crop, when you look at these new players, they've grown up with social media. Yeah. They've grown up with building a little bit of their own brand. Versus, certainly back when the players were playing in the 80s and the 90s, but even Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, kind of that those superstars now of the old guard, if you will, they didn't grow up with that. Mm-hmm. That wasn't a thing when they were coming into the league. So I think you're starting to see more of it. It'll take more time, but showcases like Game 7, when you start to see the interest that we had, I think that's how you help build stars, and that's why we have such great media partners. Including Rogers in Canada, to help us tell those stories and get that content out there.
I'm going to file this next question under when one door closes, another door opens. And unfortunately, the Arizona Coyotes, they're folding up. Why didn't it go very well in Arizona? And, hey, to the folks in Utah, hats off.
Yeah, I can't really get into, why it didn't work. And I wouldn't say it didn't work in Arizona. Clearly everyone knows, location of the building and the venue and the areas around it and everything that goes now that you see in the entertainment world is very important. And that's what they were trying to achieve. I think there was great success in the desert. It showed that the market can work. But at this point, they need to find a building, and we'll see what the future holds.
Keith Wachtel, NHL's Chief Business and Revenue Officer. We know him, Scarlet. We know him. Thank you, Keith, for joining us on the Bloomberg Business of Sports. We appreciate it.
Up next on the show, we hear from Greg Norman and Phil Mickelson about the rise of LIV Golf.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports, Bloomberg Radio around the world.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports show, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr with Scarlet Fu and Damian Sassower. We've got a special treat for you this week. Later in the show, we'll head to the Bloomberg Invest Summit held this week in Lower Manhattan. Our buddy Jason Kelly was there and spoke with some big-name executives from the Boston Red Sox, Milwaukee Brewers, and Washington Commanders. But before all that, we take a trip to Asia on the latest edition of Bloomberg Latitude with Haslinda Amin. She has brought us into the world of LIV Golf and speaks with the organization's chairman and one of its big stars.
He's on a mission to shake up golf. Greg Norman, the player's player who's built a multi-million-dollar business empire. Now he's signing up big stars and attracting a new generation of fans. Fast and furious rival to traditional golf.
We're not just sport, we're sports, entertainment, and culture.
But his LIV Tour isn't without its critics, bankrolled by the Saudis and blamed for driving division among players. But Norman says it's here to stay, and the path to securing LIV's future lies in Asia. Greg Norman, one of the biggest names in golf, has developed a reputation as a great disruptor with the controversial LIV Golf. Now, the great white shark, as he's known, is ready to take a bite of the golf market in Asia and beyond. He is one of golf's most recognizable faces, with 88 professional victories to his name and 30 top 10 finishes at majors. But he's known for more than just his swing. With a tough reputation both on and off the course, Norman is the driving force behind the upstart LIV Tour, which has upended the game and caused a rift with golf's establishment. Now, 3 years on, since becoming LIV's CEO, he's bullish about its progress.
It's very simple, one word, consistent. We've stayed consistent, we've stayed true to our model. There was a lot of headwinds in the beginning because the monopolists really control the game of golf on a global basis, and we came along with a platform or a business model that could work side by side within the ecosystem. Nowhere along, Haslinda, nowhere in my entire journey in the last 3 years since I've been CEO, commissioner, somebody come up to me and said, what you're doing is wrong. And I think that's a powerful enough testament of saying that our product is our product. And our product is received open armed by many, but by a few who want to try and stop us for all the wrong reasons. They haven't been able to sustain their position in the game of golf. What we have done brilliantly is injected more capital into the game of golf. Golf is finally looked on as an asset class.
Where do you go from here? 54 top players, you're in more than a dozen cities. What now?
Oh, look, we are in our infancy and growth, to be honest with you. Just for venues, for example. We started out a couple of years ago about doing 9 and 5, 9 in the US, 5 international, and now that's flipped. So the international scene, the global scene, has opened their arms to us in a significant way. The USA is getting there, but the globe has opened up their arms. So ultimately, what we'll end up doing is taking the game to on a global basis.
LIV Golf is different, built around teams that compete against one another rather than the more traditional single-player, head-to-head matches seen in other tours. It's also faster. 54 holes per tournament versus the 72 the PGA play.
We'll have teams based in South America. We'll have teams based out of Mexico, in Europe. So all of a sudden you can see how our growth corridor is all of a sudden starting to magnify, because once people understand what the concept of LIV is all about, this franchise model, they get it because of all the other sports, whether it's soccer or whether it's cricket or whether it's rugby league, even in the United States with the NBA, NFL, right? You follow your team. So the job of the league is to build that and keep building it and building that platform. And so we're at the tip of the iceberg.
The key to securing that global expansion, Norman says, is what LIV can offer.
What we do is we walk in with $85 million of that already supported by us. $35 million in value in the players and $50 million in prize money and other stuff and production that we put on the event. That's us, right? So when you all of a sudden realize we're a plug and play, we own the players, we own the production, we run the events, all of a sudden now you can see from a expansion standpoint, the people are going, oh my gosh, I don't have to outlay all that to get this. I can just sponsor that and have the best players in the world on the best golf courses in the world, in the best cities in the world. It's very easy to get that multiplying factor to move out.
Come on, Phil!
Phil Mickelson was one of LIV Golf's first signings, ditching the PGA Tour and encouraging other top players to follow him. What was it about LIV Golf that made you decide this is the series, the tour for me?
There were a number of things that went into the decision-making process, but what LIV is doing is it first of all gave a lot of players the opportunity to compete against the best every week. So we have the strong field every single week. And it gave a lot of the top players to have a little bit of equity in what they're doing, but the real appeal is how it is targeting a younger demographic in the game of golf, and it's also taking advantage of areas throughout the world that have not seen professional golf at the highest level and bringing that to those areas.
You've talked about how LIV will go through a disruption phase, and I think you put a number to it, about 2 years. What happens then? What would you like to see? What is likely to transpire?
Well, all of the factors that are taking place kind of quietly behind closed doors need to be ironed out. And other people are working on that, and that stuff is getting done. But as that disruption phase takes place, the stranglehold on sponsors, the stranglehold on manufacturers, the stranglehold on players, the control that is being let go. And so now that there's talk of this potential merger or so forth, sponsors are more interested. It's not as controversial. Players are starting to come over more. They're starting to see the benefits.
Mickelson has been one of the most vocal figures in the often bitter battle between LIV and the PGA over the future of golf.
Right now, though, when it comes to the business of golf, there's a great divide in the pro golf world, and conversations are ongoing about possibly a unification. Is that necessary to elevate the golf world?
I don't know if it's necessary. I know that a few years ago, it was not an option to have elevated events. It was not an option for players to have equity. And it wasn't an option for players to transcend social media markets and create YouTube channels and have their own social media posts, the way Bryson has done. And the way Bryson has brought golf and this cool, hip vibe to so many people on YouTube. That wasn't an option. So until LIV happened, none of that was going to happen. And now, because of LIV, those are all happening. We have elevated events every week out here on LIV. We have equity, and we have the ability to use our social media platforms however we want to help promote the game. And it's starting to change now, or it is changing on the PGA Tour. So this is all a really positive sign for all of us. And so the competition that both tours are providing is elevating both tours. And so is it necessary that there's a merger? Probably not. But it would be a good thing if there wasn't any hostility.
If the end goal is unification, where does it leave you? Because we know that you've expressed some harsh words towards PGA. Are you able to, you think, rebuild that relationship?
So I need to let that stuff go. I need to let go of all the experiences that I've had in the past that were less than positive. And I need to let go of my hostilities, and we all do, for the betterment of the game.
Updating golf's image for a younger generation is as important as recruiting the game's biggest stars. And that means appealing to new fans and embracing technology.
A LIV Tour is more than just a round of golf. Organizers want to create an immersive experience, harnessing entertainment and technology to draw in the fans and inspire the next generation of golfers.
How do we reach down to the 18 to 35-year-old market? How do we bring these kids, these influencers, this new generation of people interested in the game of golf? There's 738 million people in the world who are interested in the game of golf. Don't play the game of golf, but interested. There's about 60 million golfers. So we have another 670 odd million people we can go figure out how to get them interested, not just in LIV, but in the game of golf. And so we sit down and you talk about this internally with your production team, you talk about with your marketing people. I truly believe we are on the road to doing that already, because when you look at our audience base today, that we have like about just around 50% of our ticket sales are 45 years and old and younger. Following the PGA Tour, it's the oldest aging demographic in sport. It's 67 and a half. So in a matter of a year and a half, basically, we've pulled that 67 and a half down to 45 because of our product, because of the entertainment side. There are places around the world where 32% of our ticket sales are women. So they're coming to an event that they feel inclusive with. Right? So all of a sudden, we're seeing these data points coming out going, my gosh, we're owning this space.
Give us a sense of who you're in talks with in terms of distribution, in terms of streaming, because there are opinions out there suggesting that perhaps people are not really tuning in and watching LIV. How do you respond
Well, what's
to
the
that?
definition of tuning in? Turning on the TV and turning on the channel 44 and say, okay, I'm going to watch the next 4.5 hours, that's tuning in, right? But to an 18-year-old, to a 25-year-old, tuning in may be 12 seconds on the phone. Okay, well, let me see this, then I'm going to go back and do that. Oh, and then I'll come back over here and do another 14 seconds on this. Boom, that to me is tuning in. That to me is a market that's enormously wealthy, right? And enormously influential in the direction where you're going.
That's LIV Golf's Greg Norman and Phil Mickelson speaking with Haslinda Amin on the latest edition of Bloomberg Latitude. Catch the show all weekend long on Bloomberg Television. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports. Up next, golf coverage continues. We hear from some of the newest investors into the PGA. I'm Michael Barr with Scarlet and Damian Sassower, and this is Bloomberg.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks for joining us on the Bloomberg Business of Sports show, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr with Scarlet and Damian Sassower. The Bloomberg Invest Summit was held earlier this week in Lower Manhattan, featuring leaders in asset management, banking, private markets, and sports. Our own Jason Kelly was at the two-day event and had a chance to catch up with some of the biggest names in the business. First up, Jason spoke with Red Sox chairman Tom Werner and Mark Attanasio, the owner of the Milwaukee Brewers. They're part of the Strategic Sports Group, which just invested $3 billion into the PGA Tour. Here's part of that conversation.
Golf, if you look at it, if anyone follows the headlines, it's not a mess when it comes to a business. Is that part of the attraction?
Well, it starts with the macro and the brand.
Yeah.
And I was sitting, I'm on a committee with John, actually a couple of committees with John and Tom at Major League Baseball, John Henry. And they were talking about the opportunity here, but I didn't realize that what they were working on. They just talked about some of the challenges that were being faced. And I said to John, well, to me, given that brand, the more challenges, the more opportunity.
Right.
33 years of investing at Crescent, that's what we found. You know, the easy investments don't really create a lot of opportunity. The more difficult ones do. So Tom and John called me a few days later and said, were you really serious in how you looked at that? And would you invest in the PGA? And 100%, of course. And I still didn't know what they were working on. And then they let me under the tent, and it's extremely exciting.
And so, Tom, what was it for you? I mean, you know, your Fenway Sports Group, obviously the Red Sox, Liverpool, Pittsburgh Penguins, Nesson, the Sports Network, and more. What was it about golf that jumped out to you?
Well, as most of you know, the structure of golf a couple of years ago was that it was a nonprofit, and the players were independent contractors. And so this now is a league that the players are now owners. They have equity in the league, and this SSG and Fenway Sports Group are really investing in the commercial growth of the game. And of course, it all starts with, you know, what can create a better fan experience. And you know, we are grateful that we were selected because it was a very competitive situation to invest in the new structure. But, you know, we think that, and Mark is part of this group, that the operational experience that we have in sports can benefit the players and be a resource.
And so take us inside this proverbial tent a little bit. Like, what do you need to do? Like, what's the low-hanging fruit here? And what are the things you're seeing that can be relatively easily fixed or changed to improve those elements?
Well, one thing that Jay Monahan, who we think is a very strong leader, is doing is we are commencing a very extensive research study that is called Fan Forward. But Rob Manfred did the same thing in, I think, 2019, where he did a survey about what was good about baseball, how to make the experience better. And, you know, a lot of positive changes have come from that. But you know, we're going to be listening to our fans. And, you know, just one idea that we've been talking about is when you think about the experience of going to an event on the tour, that we are trying to eventize it and make it really more must-see. And somebody at the PGA was looking at Louisville. You know, they have an event every year that is really just 2 minutes long in its actual composition of the Kentucky Derby. But around it, they have a week-long festival. So one of the things that we're talking about is how to create experiences at PGA Tour events that will make them more attractive.
And so, Mark, as you look at this, you're a global investor. Obviously, one of the elements that is clearly at play here is LIV. What needs to happen?
Well, if you look at the golfers, whether they're at LIV or PGA, these are some of the best athletes in the world. And across all sports, you want to see the best athletes competing against each other. That's why, for example, you have so much interest in the Olympics. And so we hope to be a bridge or a catalyst to try to bring the golfers back together so they could compete more than just a handful of times each year.
What's your level of confidence at this moment that that'll happen?
Well, look, we're all optimistic, right? We know so we know how difficult it is and what the hurdles are, including some regulatory ones.
Yeah.
But it really should happen, and so I think it will.
And so, Tom, when you think about, one of the things that's very compelling about sort of the data underneath this is this notion of sort of off course. Many of us in this room, for better or worse, go out and hack it around the 9 or 18 holes, but increasingly more people, especially younger people, are experiencing golf in different ways. How do you, through the PGA, monetize? I mean, how do you take advantage of that movement toward the top golfs and the sims and whatnot?
Well, the first thing is to acknowledge that one factoid, I think it was up there, is that more people were playing off-course golf in 2023 than on-course. So they're both growing, but off-course golf, things like Top Golf, is very attractive. So, it is all about the popularity of the game. One of the great things about golf, as opposed to the NFL, for example, which, has its own great attributes, is that people are playing it, and so when they're watching golf, they are participants in the sport. So, whether they play golf at their country club or they're playing mini golf, at their local hangout, it's all good for the game.
And that's, 5-year-olds can play. Our Hall of Fame announcer, Bob Uecker, turned 90. He still plays golf.
Right.
Pretty well, actually.
That's Red Sox chairman Tom Werner and Mark Attanasio, the owner of the Milwaukee Brewers, speaking with Bloomberg's Jason Kelly at the Bloomberg Invest Summit. Next, Jason sat down with Josh Harris, the owner of many sports franchises, including the Philadelphia 76ers and the Washington Commanders. Here's a part of their conversation.
Did you ever expect that you'd be sitting here today with the sports empire that you have?
Not my wildest dreams. Not my wildest dreams. I mean, the notion that I would own the Philadelphia 76ers, where I had gone to college, the New Jersey Devils, where my dad had grown up, and then obviously a whole lot of other, Crystal Palace in London, where I'd lived, and then obviously the Washington Commanders, where I spent my... I was 1 to 18 in Washington. I was 0 to 1 in Philly, and then I went back to Penn. So the notion I would own and really manage the two sports franchises that I'd grown up really passionate about was incredible. It's an incredible dream come true.
And so what did you see, other than, I believe you had been at Penn when the Sixers won a championship, is that right? What did you see that was, from your investor perspective, that was compelling about sports then?
Yeah, so my personal journey was, obviously, I grew up with the Washington Commanders, the then Washington Commanders, but John Reagan's, Joe Gibbs, 3 Super Bowls. And 1982, the Commanders won the Super Bowl. The then Redskins, everyone came out in the streets, and D.C. was a very divided city. I witnessed all that, and then went up to Penn and saw the Philadelphia 76ers win the NBA championship, and Philly was also a city that was kind of having trouble. So I witnessed everyone come out, 2 ticker tape parades in 1 year when I was 17 to 18 years old, and it really dawned on me that sports really unified communities. And then started Apollo, and then obviously got to the opportunity to achieve financial success. The financial crisis happened, and the Sixers, we had heard the Sixers might be not in Comcast's long-term future. And I literally just called them and went back to my day job of doing what's called a corporate carve-out, and I was zigging when other people were zagging. It was just after the financial crisis. The NBA was in lockout.
Right.
The Sixers were losing $40 or $50 million a year. I paid $280 million for the Sixers. I put together a group. I called David Blitzer, my friend, and a friendly competitor from Blackstone, and we had, known each other, gone to Penn, and we put together a group to buy the Sixers. I was quite nervous about turning it around, but we took them from 27th in the league in revenue to 5th, and so that's now a profitable entity. And so the idea there was more of a passionate thing where I wanted to really lift the city, connect with the city, bring the Sixers back. Obviously in business, which we're all used to, EBITDA, stock price, valuation, cash flow. In sports, it's about winning championships and creating memories, right? So that's why I originally got into sports. Obviously, the journey had started as more of a value-oriented journey, very similar to what I do at 26 North. The evolution is quite different.
Right.
As we go into the days today, we can talk about it, but obviously I just paid, at the time I paid $6 billion for the Commanders, and that's 60 times EBITDA. And my credentials as a value investor were shattered, I joke. But the sports has changed a lot in that journey.
Yeah.
We can talk about that if you'd like.
Yeah, so I think you led me exactly where I wanted to go, which was that $6 billion figure, you're right, doesn't look like a value when you pencil it out. And yet, if you read the headlines today or in the past month or so on Bloomberg and elsewhere, Jeffrey Lurie, your NFC East rival and neighboring franchise with the Philadelphia Eagles, selling a stake reportedly at a valuation of $7.5 billion. I'm not that good at math, but that's 25% more than the valuation you paid. $10 billion is the number that Stephen Ross is talking about, again, reportedly, for the Dolphins and associated properties. That's a huge jump. What is driving these valuations, and how much higher can they go?
Right. So if you look at the evolution of sports content, right, particularly the big sports, the NFL and the NBA leading the way, there's a massive globalization of content because of the ability of people to stream content and watch it on their phone. So in many cases, there are more people watching the Sixers in China than there are in Philly. And that's the case all over the world.
That's Josh Harris, the owner of the Philadelphia 76ers and the Washington Commanders. That does it for this episode of the Bloomberg Business of Sports Show. We are here each and every week at the same time. For my colleagues Scarlet and Damian Sassower, I'm Michael Barr. Tune in again next week for the latest on the stories moving big old money in the world of sports. You're listening to Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.